Welcome to Season 2, Episode 8 of the Bithell Games Podcast. I'm Alexander Slawinski.
And I'm Mike Bithell.
Each week we talk games, what it's like to make games, and the random stuff we don't generally find time to talk about because we are playing and or making games. Show notes. We've had a recent surge of listeners, so welcome.
Cool. Hello, everyone.
Welcome all the new folks, and thank you for those who've stuck through us.
Stuck through it is the right way of describing the listening experience which we provide. So,
welcome to all the new folks. Meanwhile, had a bit of a hiccup last week with our contact@bithellgames.com address. So if you sent in any reader mail this past week, please go ahead and send it again. Don't really understand what went wrong, but
it's a little worrying.
Yeah, no, we had some issues where emails in general weren't getting through. No real rhyme or reason, because that's the best kind, right? Like,
that's the kind of bug you want. Yeah, something that happens occasionally and then disappears. That's always the one you feel most confident about when shipping a game. Yeah,
the one you can't duplicate. Always the best. Mm-hmm. No, the worst bug. That is the worst. Anyway, what are you playing, Mike?
I'm still playing Horizon.
Me too.
Lots of Horizon.
Have you Zelda'd yet?
I Zelda'd for an hour, and it was enough to realize this is a great game, and I'm very much looking forward to playing it next time I have to go on a long business trip. Because I think that's the thing for me, is I look at the Switch as an incredible portable, and that's how I'm looking forward to playing it mostly, I think. My girlfriend is playing a lot of it. She'll disappear for periods of time. And I'll just hear the ba 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 noise. It's like, oh, okay, fair enough.
So now, is she there on the couch, like, using your butt as a foot heater, like, while you play Horizon? Like, how's that working?
She's actually generally disappearing.
Yeah,
she
just slides the things in, takes it away. Boop, God.
She just wants to get in her little world when she's playing, and I think as well because obviously we have quite a big TV and sound and everything. I think she wants to have a bit of room to enjoy stuff without hearing my Horizon music playing. No, we've never. A lot of my friends, I think you do this as well, right? Having like multiple TVs.
Yes.
That's a good way of kind of handling this. We've never done that. We've always been Mike plays video games during the day. That's generally how it works. And then, if I'm loving a game, or often a game if it's good to watch. Horizon's an interesting one, because Horizon, while the story stuff is good, the frequency of it's quite low. So it's not quite as much stuff for her to enjoy watching, because, watching over my shoulder as I shoot arrows at a dinosaur is not as much fun. But yeah, have you been playing Zelda?
No, I have not. I've been playing a lot of Horizon. Zelda, for me, again, probably a very similar situation where it's going to be I don't think I'm going to play it on the big screen. I actually think I might play it portable.
Yeah.
And just, take it wherever I want to go. I
think that makes sense.
I haven't looked at carrying cases for I keep calling it the Wii. It's not called the Wii, guys.
There's one that all the game journalists are buying, and I need to find out what the name of that is, because I've seen them talking about it on Twitter. I need to find out what the best case is. There you go. There's a feature someone should write. The 5 best Switch carry cases. All the clicks.
For me, I think that's the way I'm gonna play the Switch.
Yeah.
It's just especially once the ball really starts rolling on those games, because strategically I'm still not sure if the Switch is going to be treated as a console or if it's going to be treated as a handheld. And if it's going to be treated like a handheld, then I might actually play my first Pokemon game ever for more than 5 hours. Because I've tried. I really have. I've given Pokemon games the college try, and it's just, it never seems to really click in.
It's nice to have the option to flip, isn't it? I think that's the thing for me, is the idea of, like, a game that you can enjoy when you're out and about, but then also you can get home and put it on the TV and sit on the sofa,
Well, I'm looking forward to what does Smash Brothers look like on that thing. Like that's going to be fascinating, because just the idea of, with how portable it is, like going to a PAX, or just, even being in London, right? Like I hope I find friends, but like just being in London and being able to, like, take that to someone's house. It's not a big deal. And you can just play Smash Brothers.
I think that's going to be really cool. I went for a nice meal in a very nice restaurant with some other devs, and a guy brought his Switch and wanted to play 1-2 Switch in this very posh restaurant.
I don't think I could do that.
That was odd. No, I don't think the waiter was very impressed.
I think going to that bar that you took me to, like, that would definitely be something that...
The loading bar.
Yes.
Oh yeah, loading bar's the place to play Switches, definitely.
Like, that would be, like, I think that's the perfect sort of, like, Switch environment, for Smash Brothers or Splatoon or any of the things that...
Yeah, you're going to find lots of takers on a game of Smash there. They used to have, actually, I don't know if they still do, but they used to have, like, the Wii U setup with Smash. Just that it was a Smash console basically in terms of what they had on there. But yeah, Horizon's cool. So one thing that's interesting about Horizon, we often don't talk about the late game because we tend to talk about whatever's new on this segment, but Horizon, actually, as it goes on, the thing that's impressing me is how much the robot dinosaur thing lends itself to later game content.
Yeah,
because a lot of open world games, you start off weak, and then about a few hours in, you've maxed out everything, or you've unlocked a bunch of stuff, and suddenly it's basically just a god simulator, right? You're just killing bad guys left, right, and center. And I'm really liking how it's scaling the enemies to what I'm doing. With humans, it's a bit weird. You get the kind of bullet spongy enemies. I was streaming a bit earlier, and it's like 3 headshots to kill some guys later on. That's not so much fun. That's weird. But
meanwhile, coming across a T-Rex with a radar dish,
that makes sense.
And tracking missiles and like what else? It's just like every 80s fantasy like on that T-Rex.
But it works, right? It doesn't feel cheaty. Having that range of enemies feels much more dynamic and interesting than just fighting humans over and over again. And I'm really enjoying that aspect as it goes on. The kind of the later stage enemies are just nasty.
I also like the idea of coming across something where it's like nothing I can do about that. you like the first time you get into that mesa area and you see the creatures that are in there, you're just like, nothing I can do. Just run.
Yeah,
there's nothing I can do.
Just walk away. So no, it's cool. It's really sustaining. I think the story for me is not. I like the story. I'm not. The writing. I'm finding I'm getting a bit bored by. I'm finding myself skipping side quest dialogue and stuff like that, which is weird for me. I'm trying to work out what about it isn't holding my interest, because visually it's beautiful. Story wise, I like the overarching kind of plot that's being uncovered. Massive spoilers on my stream earlier by accident, like a big event occurred, and a lot of people on the stream I think were a bit annoyed to find something out. But yeah, so there is an interesting problem I have with some of the dialogue and NPC stuff. I'm not finding as interesting as I could, and I'm trying to work out what that is. It's still very good, and the facial animation continues to be awesome. I love it's kind of a lip curl that they've got in their repository. Brilliant. Love it. But yeah, so that's the only issue I have right now, is I'm trying to work out what's not working for me with that. But other than that, it's just great. It's a great game.
I think it's interesting how from a world layout, and maybe like other games have done this and I just haven't noticed it, but like, or now because I work with you, I notice these things a lot more. But the map layout definitely leads you through different like ranges of levels as it keeps going. Like as you keep moving through the world, it is not open world and leveling to what you're at. Like it's trying to lead you down a path, and if you go too far down the path, you've gone too far. Like there's just no way you can do the stuff that's in that area.
There's certainly a commitment to extremes. Like, I love the fact, and it's something that doesn't make sense on paper, but when you're doing it in world, it makes perfect sense. The kind of, you'll literally cross a bridge and you'll go from tundra to ice. Like the way the environments just change very quickly makes it feel more diverse than those kind of soft, gentle changes that you see in most games. And that's true, yeah, like you say, of difficulty. There's certainly, if you just go exploring too early in the game, you're going to get your ass kicked.
So you've never been to Long Island? On Long Island, outside New York, you can cross a street and you go from one extreme to the next. It's very much like Horizon. It's the same sort of thing.
I've never been to Long Island. I've met people from Long Island. I've chatted with people from Long Island. They all seem very nice, but I've not been there.
But yeah, the differences in there, like you said, even looking at the map, like it kind of looks a little weird.
Snow zone, desert zone. Yeah.
But in game, it works.
It really does.
The transition is gradual, but like suddenly after about 30 seconds, you realize, oh wait, I'm in a completely different place.
Yeah, when you first arrive in kind of what I would call kind of Badlands, Arizona kind of environment, like the kind of what I imagine the middle of America to look like, with the big mesa and the kind of like that stuff just blew me away. And it was because it was an immediate change. I think if it had been more gradual, you wouldn't get such a kick out of it. It's a lot of great vistas, a lot of very nice environmental design.
Oh, have you messed around with the photo mode yet at all?
I clicked it a couple of times. It's fine. I can see the appeal, and I can see some people making beautiful stuff with it. It's not a part of games that I generally fiddle with too much, because frankly I have to do enough bloody real screenshots of things that I don't. It's too much of a busman's holiday for me. But it looks nice. It looks like it kind of leans into what the game's good at rendering, which is great.
Yeah. No, it is. If you have Horizon, you haven't looked at the photo mode yet, like that's definitely just something worth messing around with, because it's beautiful and there's so many options in it. It's one of those things. It's one of those things I don't think at our scale we have the luxury of being able to implement something like that. But you'd
be surprised.
Would I? This is one of those things where I realize,
the kind of things that look more expensive than they are.
Yeah, and this is one of those moments where it's like, I bring something up and I'm just like, well, he's either going to tell me, no, we're not, like, there's no way we could do that.
What part of it looks expensive to you? That's an interesting thing to, I don't know if it's interesting to anyone listening to the podcast, but what aspect of photo modes looks expensive to you?
Jonathan, go ahead and just change on the YouTube right here from what are you playing to photo mode, because I think we're going to go down this road for a couple minutes.
Sure, tell me what looks expensive to you there.
So as a player, what I find fascinating is being able to pause the game, go into that third-person camera mode, and then just move around and switching the, it's not just being able to change the gamma or stuff like that. It's also being able to switch the time of day so that like the light isn't facing like directly at the camera, right? Like, giving nice shadows, being able to like, twist things around, looking at all the different options. But I mean, from a player perspective, like just one of the neatest aspects is like you made a freeze frame of what to you is a 2D environment that you are now able to move around inside of it in 3D and pick the shot that you want.
Yeah, I mean, so any developers listening to this
is laughing.
Well, not laughing, but just kind of, they're things that you get for free almost. So things like changing the weather situation, sure, time of day, yeah, that's stuff that, the game, obviously the hard part is putting those things in the first place, but once you have them, that's a very easy thing to change a variable on. Pausing the game is obviously very easy. Giving the player some kind of camera control, usually confined, but giving them some, easy. Even those kind of Instagram filters, again, it's stuff that's very kind of straightforward to do. There's nothing you just said that sounds ridiculous. Like, there's no I mean, the reason to not do it is just about focus. It's just like, but given how important sharing and screenshots are now, I suspect we'll probably put something like that into our next game. I would have thought.
Did you just
promise a feature?
Did you just feature creep on us?
No, it's genuinely like, it's one of those things. You've got to salute. I'm trying to think of the first game that did it. I want to say Infamous Second Son was the first kind of console screenshot camera mode. I mean, you could obviously trace it back to like, was it Halo 3 that allowed you to like change replays and stitch together video of gameplay?
Yes.
I remember, was it Halo 3 or Halo 2? No, that was Halo 3, wasn't it?
No, the machinima aspects, I believe, was Halo 3.
Yeah, so maybe that's the originator.
But if I think of like the PlayStation photo mode, which is, you know, for their AAA,
yeah, which is kind of standardized now for them a lot, right?
Yeah, I mean, I know Last of Us definitely had it.
Did the original Last of Us have it? I feel like that was something they added for the PS4 re-release.
That's very possible that it was added later. But yeah, there's been a couple high-profile PlayStation games that have had this photo mode thing with them, and it's a lovely addition.
It is, but what's great about it from a development point of view is you make that anyway. We have that for volume, because we had to make screenshots of like, these are the tools you make. The challenging, interesting bit is making a cool interface for it, something that's understandable. But as that starts to standardize, it becomes easier to just go, well, let's just frankly put in this very similar system to Horizon, to Infamous, to Uncharted. It's stuff, a lot of the stuff that you have access to in those modes is stuff that developers have to make anyway in order to make dynamic screenshots.
Let me go change the budget on the next game now. Scamper.
Just add a few quid, it'll be fine. No, but it's something that's I think you're going to see more and more of those modes creep into games because it's really not a big feature.
And now it's time for what's going on at the studio. And what's going on at the studio is the incredibly sexy and interesting and dynamic and just, oh boy, Mike is going to love talking about this topic. It's fiscal year end, folks.
I'll be back in 15 minutes.
Aww. Well, okay, so fiscal year end. So now to our UK audience, they're going, well, yeah, that's normal. It's the end of March. We have to. That's the whole tax thing is happening now and blah blah. But to our American listeners, they're used to a lovely anachronism. Would anachronism be the right word here?
I'm guessing it wouldn't be.
Probably not.
Unless you're about to say, you know, we use a 1980s tax return system. That would be an anachronism.
Well, of calendar versus fiscal years, since many companies follow this, you know, the similar thing to what the UK has of a company ends its fiscal year at the end of March and begins in April instead of it being on a calendar, which is what our personal taxes are. Anyway, whole other story. But
I'm riveted so far.
But the point is, I'm spending my time right now, like, getting everything organized and together for our accountant to, you know, clean that up. And anyway, I'm currently spending my time, you know, making sure everything is clean for the accountant to do their thing. But I think there's something that's important to bring up for independent developers, especially any independent developers that are listening to the show, because it comes with some cultural baggage. And talking about finances in any way comes with some baggage. But I think the first thing I sort of want to start off with is, if you are in a region, and this is, you know, again, very much my personal. Actually, this isn't a personal thing. You've been on stage and talked about this, so I'm not gonna say this is a personal thing. But I believe taking the opportunity of, if you are in a region or if you're in the United States, specific states, have tax relief available for companies, and I think it is incredibly important that you take these opportunities, because it ends up being a significant amount of it's a portion. So, for example, in the UK, it is 20% of the creative spend comes back to the company. You can submit to that. There's a process you have to go through. There's a multi-dozen page document that you need to do, and then make a schedule and make a budget and fill out a bunch of forms. But at the end of that, you receive 20% back, which at our scale, it's nice. You can certainly see why AAA publishers certainly want to take advantage of that, because if they spend $10 million, they get $2 million back.
If you've got a team of 4 people, you can get a 5th person for free.
Right. And that's a huge, that makes a huge...
It's massive.
Yeah,
it's massive.
It makes a huge difference in development. And so, yeah, there are certainly opportunities all around the world. Once upon a time, the UK did not have this tax relief, but a small country across the pond called Canada did.
Canada, right? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, Canada. And so they did, and so there's a very strong argument to be made here that the UK lost a lot of its development funding and publisher funding and other things because the Canadians sort of rose up, and
a lot of developers as well. I mean, there was a crazy amount of British talent that now lives, and is based in Canada.
Yeah,
a lot of British developers in Canada.
And if you want to talk about the numbers we're talking about here, I believe these are the most up to date, but apologies if they've changed just recently. So just speaking for Canada, British Columbia has 17.5% back. Manitoba has 40%. New Brunswick has 30%. Nova Scotia has 50%.
That is 50% is amazing. So if you develop a game and you spend 100,000 on talent, on people working on the game, the government gives you back 50,000. Is that correct?
Of eligible labor.
So development staff would be eligible. Wow, that's amazing.
And there's, again, there are details in here, and it does require paying attention to things. But Ontario is 40%, Prince Edward Island is 30%, and Quebec is, I believe it's now 32%. But as of the GameIndustry.biz article I'm looking at right now, it was 37%. I believe it's fluctuated in the meantime. But when you're a company, and that makes a huge difference.
So Alexander,
yes,
what are the cultural benefits and improvements that giving all this tax money to games companies have in those countries?
Well, for starters, it allows you to hire more people.
Well, so not the business, but the country, more people get hired.
Yeah.
Culturally, they have more of an impact because there's more games that have Canadian characters in them, or are set in Canada, or have,
well, if it's something specific,
the Montreal scenes in Assassin's Creed, right? You do all that stuff.
Well, I mean, specifically, in the UK, you have to jump through some hoops and making sure that your game is representing British culture, and that can mean having, the easiest one is that your game is in English. Okay, great. We can certainly handle that one, especially from a global perspective, probably the right thing to do.
It's not a massive impact. But you see this as well. So the British one is based on the system that's in place for films. And there's a lot of film production over here. Obviously, Marvel and Star Wars movies are made in the UK largely. Those kind of things. And what do you see? In Captain America, you see the scene where they're training in Britain. In every action movie now, there's a scene set in London. That's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that Tom Cruise is running around London at the start of the latest Mission Impossible. It's because that film production got a massive discount for making the film in the UK because they had, London on camera. So that's a massive benefit as well, and that's something that you can see in films, and it means more. It probably helps with tourism, I assume. It helps with putting the UK on the map and making us feel like a quote unquote important country. And I guess Canada's the same. I just wanted to think about outside of business, because obviously the benefits to business are pretty obvious, right? It means we can hire more people and make better stuff. So
Yeah,
that's
but I mean,
great.
it also means, you know, your culture is represented globally, and that obviously that is something that the Americans in the film industry, had a lovely time over the last 100 years of like getting that culture all across the globe because of films. Now, specifically for the U.S., I should also bring up that if you live in certain U.S. states, it is very much what Mike was just saying, that most of the game incentives are buried inside film incentives.
Right.
So if your state has any type of film incentive, and off the top of my head, the big one is Georgia. You've probably now seen at the end of Archer.
You see a lot of Georgia references, the end of credits of films, right?
Yeah, Walking Dead. A lot of I believe a lot of Turner Broadcasting. Just whenever you see that peach symbol at the end of shows and movies that you watch, there's a 20 to 30% tax credit involved in that, and the project must have a minimum spend of like $500,000 to get that. So it actually incentivizes spends in that state that do make a significant impact as well. So tax incentives. So if you, even as an independent developer, I would strongly encourage looking into the sort of regional opportunities that exist there. Now, the only other thing, and then we'll get off this topic and go to reader mail. The only other thing that I sort of want to bring up here, and this absolutely has cultural baggage attached to it, is separating personal finance from company finances. And this is something that independent developers not the greatest at.
No. You got a little bank account with the money in.
Yeah.
And then we spend the money on the video games and the food and the rent.
Yeah.
Simple.
And it's not, and especially
really not. No.
and especially if you take opportunities like these incentives, which I encourage that you do, you want to be able to split the two apart, and that could be as simple as having two separate bank accounts. One is your personal bank account, and the other one is the company account, and making sure that the company account, pays like, put some money in, and it should be structured because you should be paying yourself. If you have any type of means to do that, please pay yourself. You have you have to live, so there should be some kind of wage going in your direction. Now the issue here, and this is where the real cultural baggage comes in, is the difference between cash, debit, and credit cards. And this is definitely something that Mike and I have, discussed. Is again, from a American perspective, I would strongly encourage using a credit card, because a credit card is paid off at the end of a period. Now, yes, it does require a bit of fortitude on your behalf not to overspend, because a credit card should get paid off at the end of every month. It shouldn't be something that sort of sits out there. But there is a cultural difference that goes on in the concept of credit and debt and how that is utilized. But if you are spending on, if you are doing company expenses, a credit card is a very lovely way to keep track of. See, it's a very lovely way.
Every British person is just like completely, well, not every British person, but I think a lot of British people will be confused as hell about this.
Right.
Because I don't get it. Culturally was brought up, don't get a credit card. That's really silly.
And so from an American perspective, there's the argument to be made that you have your personal credit card and you have your company credit card, and company credit.
So now you have
card
two credit cards.
Well, and it builds credit, which also helps your credit score, which, you know, is your FICO score here in the States. And it is necessary for you to be able to, you know, get a good car loan, get a good, like, you know, mortgage.
Or buy things you can afford. I mean, that's the other option, right?
But if you only spend cash, you don't get a credit score. And a credit score is necessary to be able to do certain things.
Yeah, no, you are absolutely right. And I should point this out for the audience that I'm mocking, but I know that Alexander is speaking a lot of sense. I would also suggest, though, that anyone listening to this, we are not accountants, and they should get advice from someone who's a professional in their specific country or state or situation.
Well, I mean, this goes back to no, we're not talking about doing your taxes here. Like we're talking about personal finance. And
I'm still saying that local advice would be a good idea.
Yes, no, absolutely get local advice.
I'm making sure we say that.
Well, I also want to stress, if you run a company, you should also have an accountant. That is something
very much the case.
You should very much have. There's really only two places, you know, and I know we've brought this up before, but I don't think in this specific season. Like, there's only two places where
of our two-season podcast.
But I feel this is one of the places, you know, I should bring this up again. There's only really two spots where I would argue you must have professional advice, and that is lawyers and accountants. Like,
and game design, right? That's the other one.
Take it or leave it.
Yeah, no, it's anyone can make a video game. It's fine.
I mean, that's, you know, who needs artists or business guys?
I've seen it on Twitter. You can just you can get Game Maker, you can ship something by the end of the day. It's fine.
This is why we don't talk about legitimate things on this show.
So we only talk about illegitimate, uninteresting, unimportant things on the show.
We talk about your fanciful stuff. That's what we.
I think people are getting an insight into our working relationship here. That's perhaps too honest.
But yes. So here we are. Companies typically have a year that begins, 1st of April, or, you know, from a tax perspective in the UK, it's the 6th of April. I really should look that up sometime as to why that is. But
the Empire, Alexander.
Because the Queen.
It's because of our proud history. That's why.
But yeah, the typical businesses go from April to March, and everything has to be done in that time. But the big takeaway here is please look into the opportunities that exist for you to save a bit of cash on your taxes. It is very important. You are a business owner. You are supplying funds and hiring people and doing things that are contributing to the economy.
Can I counterbalance?
What?
Be proud to pay your taxes. They go on awesome things. Especially,
you're still paying taxes.
No, absolutely. But I felt the need to jump in there. No,
Okay, hold on. No. If we're gonna go down this, I'm gonna take a couple minutes here on this one as well.
Okay.
We are paying our taxes.
I know we do.
We are not some multinational conglomerate that is hiding money in Ireland, or doing the double Irish Dutch sandwich type stuff, which please Wikipedia that if you want to,
but turn on safe search. I think we can agree on that, right?
But if you really want to get into the dark arts of how mega corporations are able to offshore their cash.
Yeah, we're not doing that. We are using incentives to which make us do the kind of behavior that the government wants us to do, right? They make us hire in Europe, and presumably soon that will change into hire in Britain. They encourage us to grow our business. These are incentives that are designed to get us to basically provide jobs and pay more tax in the long run, right? That's what this is all built on.
And we do.
And we do. And we do.
I mean, talking.
That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying is that I just wanted to contextualize. For me, those are the kinds of things that I'm happy with us not taking advantage, but making use of. We're never going to do the whole, Dutch triple sandwich, 3-way, whatever it was.
It's the double Irish Dutch sandwich.
Dutch sandwich, got it. That's not the kind of thing we're talking about here, because that to me, that's just about us getting richer, which isn't very interesting and isn't very civil-minded. But, things like this that allow us to bring in more people, make our games better, and just generally, I think, do a better job, I'm all for.
Yeah. But there is a huge difference between, us doing this type of stuff and offshoring cash, so you don't have to pay taxes on it or do any of that stuff.
Yeah, it's a different kind of thing. I think sometimes those things get lumped together, which doesn't help.
So in conclusion, please take the opportunities that exist for you to hire more people and contribute more to your state or your local government, being able to fund roads and hospitals and such things. And also, if you have the opportunity here, you should also make sure to separate your personal finances from your company finances, and just it makes things cleaner. Your accountant will be much happier for this, and that's it. That's it. I'm done. Here we go, Jonathan.
Play the jingle.
Play that jingle.
1, 2, 3. I wanna thank you for reading the mail again. Thank you for reading the mail again.
All right, this is a long one, so buckle up.
Let's do this.
Hello, Alexander and Mike. Love the new season. When you guys read my last email on the show, it was October of season 1, episode 44. Love that people are starting to do that.
Seasons. It's awesome. Completely arbitrary.
I can't believe it's been that long, but time sure does pass when you're working your butt off. To recap, I wrote in last time about winning an educational game contract with the USACE, which is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Cool. Despite my lack of prior professional experience in game dev, the podcast discussion was mostly about imposter syndrome, educational game dev, iCarly, and me being a, quote, badass. Thanks for the boost, Mike. The contract ended as of February 17th, and we have delivered the final product to the client. In our final meeting, they praised us for the game being, quote, consistently above expectations, end quote. But that sounds like
I clearly has earned the reputation.
They are pleased with it, and so are we. We've gotten similar praise from our business department because we used 20% less budget than we initially planned for, without sacrificing anything but our own time. Okay, we're going to get back to that in a second. 95% of the credit should go to the Unity team and the Unity Asset Store, though we never, would have made it without their amazing community and tools. The point. Sometime after the halfway mark of the contract, it was clear that me and my colleague, Chris, had really grown as developers. We were making less mistakes, correcting old ones, and iterating faster. It was an amazing feeling when I realized that my only limitations now are target platform interface. What does that mean, Mike?
So there's two meanings of interface. Could mean that he could mean the controller itself, like making it work with thumbsticks and face buttons and triggers and all that stuff, or they could mean the act of making the engine work with the console. That would also be considered an interface. So either or, but both are kind of similar. I know exactly what he means. That's scary until you do it. Like getting something running and working on a console is intimidating.
So my imagination and my own motivation. As the deadline moved closer, we could see the trajectory to the final product, and we had a choice to make. Either we turn on cruise control and shoot for MVP, which is minimum viable product, or we switch gears to make a game we can be proud of. Put another way, we could stay comfortable, or we could push our limits. We immediately started a voluntary every other week crunch to flesh out the game. We would crunch for a week and then work normal hours for a week, which still came out to 50 to 60 hours. We sacrificed a lot, occasionally peaking at around 36 hours in 48-hour periods. It was difficult sometimes to keep it up and be a father, but I don't think I could ever actually choose the MVP route in good conscience. It feels dishonest, not only to the client and players, but to myself. I feel that everyone involved is cheated out of the better result if the effort is reduced. We made as many cuts as we could to reduce the workload without breaking the game, but in the end, we probably worked too much. So here's the question.
Yeah.
As you've touched on in recent weeks, game dev is fluid. Just when you think it's all perfectly planned out, you'll probably discover necessary changes that will affect the plan, which can cascade throughout the entire design and budget of the project. How do you manage to keep such a high standard for yourself, releasing only what you can be proud of while keeping an adequate work-life balance, but without bankrupting your company's cash flow or releasing MVPware? Do you have to crunch to make good quality experiences? Question mark.
Should I take a run at this?
Yeah.
Okay. So first off, congratulations on shipping the game. That's awesome. And congratulations for shipping a game that's clearly impressive. That's also awesome. I should definitely caveat this with...
by the way, his name is Nick, and there's a follow-up question afterwards, which is why I didn't get to the end. But Nick, if you need to refer to him.
Okay, Nicky boy, my buddy Nicholas, the great Nick. So a caveat for me here is that my work-life balance sucks. I'm terrible at it. I work way too many hours. It's something. For me, it's an ongoing project to get better at that.
I can confirm this.
You can confirm this. You've seen me working when I really shouldn't be.
And we have done what we can to not have you do that.
Yeah, but I would say there's an interesting structural difference there between someone who owns a company and owns a studio overworking themselves and someone who runs a studio expecting their staff to overwork. And that's a line that we've never crossed. You know, my team works the hours that they want to work and the structure that makes sense for them. And I would definitely step in if I saw someone in my team doing too many hours, doing beyond, frankly, what is comfortable. My view, and fortunately, the view of everyone who's ever done research on crunch and everyone who's ever looked at how those longer periods affect people, it's not worth it. The impact, you can look at different studies have said this to different degrees, but effectively, if you're working a week of crunch, you're probably, in terms of your output, in terms of what you're actually making, achieving what you would have done if you'd stayed at reasonable hours. The data varies. Some studies do reckon that like a week is fine, but then, you know, doing more of that or having to do that sequentially can be challenging.
And I should also step in here is that this isn't, you're not just being hippy dippy here. Like
I'm not being a wet liberal on this one. I am on most issues, but on this one there is lots of data that backs this up.
There's a very strong business, you know, what in business it would just be called diminishing returns. Like,
yeah. Forgetting people, if we just assume that we're just talking about output, you don't care about the people, let's assume that, then yes, the actual product of their labor will decrease and as a result will become expensive in two directions, because you're both paying them for more hours worked and the work they're doing in those hours is weaker. So therefore you're paying twice basically for the work. That's not good. And that does have a negative effect. It does vary though, and different people have different structures. I think if it's you and you own the company, I think you can be a bit more fluid on that stuff, because frankly, that's your decision. I would still recommend against it. But as I said, if I pretended that I work 9 to 5, I'd be a hypocrite and a liar. Like I definitely suffer from the same problem. What I would say though, crucially here, and it was the point which I think Alexander as well, I heard a tone, a tone I've become accustomed to. Crucially, you I think I can't remember the exact phrasing, but you basically said, to my understanding, that if that you feel you would have been letting down the people you were working for if you hadn't gone that extra mark. And that's where I would disagree with you. That though they have paid for a service, you are providing that service. It is your job to provide the service you sold them. If you overperform, that's brilliant, but that is not a requirement when working on a client project. When you're working for the community, obviously, yeah, when you're selling a game directly, you want to go above and beyond expectations. What I would suggest, though, is that should be budgeted for and that should be accounted for. It's definitely something when we're talking about, like, you know, I think we've alluded to a few times on the podcast. We're putting together a very big project right now, and we're kind of working out how that's going to work over several years and how that structure will work. We are budgeting to over-deliver. We are not budgeting and then going, well, if, you know, we'll work hard on top of this and make something even better.
There's no optimism. Yeah, there's no optimism. Like,
and there's a lot of money that's in the budget that we don't know how we're going to spend yet. We're going to spend it on the stuff that we would normally go over budget spending money on. And that kind of finding those things and building into your budget. And, you know, when you work with a lot of the kind of the bigger publishers, they know this and they plan for this and they want this in your budget, this kind of this buffer that allows you to go further. That should be something you plan for. It should not be a surprise to you. And when I say plan for it, I don't mean plan for crunch. I mean plan for bringing in more people or taking a bit longer if you have to on something or whatever. But crunch is something that makes people feel like they're achieving more, and all the data says that they're not. You might be the exception, though.
And there is this level of romanticism about crunch,
the pizza boxes, the sleeping under the desks. I remember as a student being like, that was the stuff I romanticized. I was excited to have my first proper games industry crunch. That excitement dissipates after a few weeks. But yeah, it's not glamorous, and it's something that no one benefits from beyond the producers feeling like they're achieving more, which is not true. How about you, Alexander? What's your thoughts?
I mean, I would rather have a firm understanding among the team that crunch is unacceptable, and have that be part of the DNA of the company, than it is to like, oh, well, 6:00, the team's still here. I guess we should order in pizzas and you know, do that. And it's funny, you know, due to some other things going on, like I've had to do research on stuff from, you know, over 10 years ago. And yes, like budgeting for crunch was actually something that was openly.
Oh yeah. It was an itemized thing, right? It was an itemized thing in the budget.
It was literally an itemized thing in the budget. And it's not okay. It's a failure of project management. It is a failure of communication between management and staff. It's a mess. It's a mess on a couple different things where it's treating, and maybe this is because it is, you know, it is a younger leaning industry, that there is this like, oh, we're gonna have a sleepover type, like, you know, like pajamas and like, you know, there's this like, and it's not sexy. It's not.
It's something that it's still prevalent though. It's have you started watching Netflix's Iron Fist yet?
I've started it.
So from the first episode, there's a running joke or running kind of thing that the bad guy, definitely the bad guy, very heavily implied the bad guy, one of his evil crimes is he has a bunch of young have you got to this point? He has like employees, interns, kind of young, and he literally points to one and says, you get them young, you get them unmarried, that you pay them twice what they're worth, and they'll be the most loyal they could be to you, and they'll never leave the office. And it's, you know, Iron Fist is getting, you know, it's getting knocked, and it's definitely not the best Netflix show. But that line, I was like, that's how you do a villain in 2017, that guy. that has been the proviso of the games industry. I think it's also one of the reasons we're not very good at diversity, is because it plays into the kind of the young male ego, that kind of working environment is something.
The meritocracy.
The quote unquote meritocracy, right? Like that plays into a lot of what young people do. It's being muddled now by the fact that these men and women are starting their own companies, so it's a different cultural thing there. And when it's your company, you feel a lot more invested. And like I said, I think that grays this up a bit, and I think makes it harder to sometimes keep to that 9 to 5 thing. But I think we all should try to. I think it should be the objective to not do crunch. I would say one other thing, and it does come up in these conversations. There will always be, you know, milestones and jobs where, you know, one person, a couple of people have to, like, you know, take a couple of days and work hard. We definitely do this. In my case, I never make anyone else do it, but I do it like when we have a big deadline, things come up. So a day or two of crunch, where you take care of everyone and make sure everyone's given a big bonus and some pizza, like, sure. It's when it's institutionalized. It's when it's a plan. When it's, in this case, every 2 weeks we do every 2 weeks we do a week of crunch. When you're planning crunch, that's when it's gone wrong.
If crunch is in the budget, it's definitely gone wrong.
If it's on the timetable, if it's something that creeps up on people, yeah, sure, it does happen, and it sucks, but it does happen.
Yeah, but to answer your question, like your question specifically, how do you manage to keep such a high standard for yourself, releasing only what you can be proud of while keeping an adequate work-life balance, but without bankrupting? That's budgeting. That's being incredibly, pessimistic to very realistic on your budgeting. And if you don't know what that means yet, it basically means, whatever you think you're going to do, whatever, reduce it by 20%, reduce it by 30%, and see if you can still hit those targets. Because things are going to go wrong. That is a natural part of it. But the problem, the way crunch happens is that someone is telling someone else incredibly optimistic to
I can do this in a month, and
to almost naive, right? Yeah. It's not just optimism. If true crunch requires naivete. It requires naivete or
literal dishonesty, right?
Yeah, across the entire board. It requires the producer or whoever's creating the budget. It requires management to in its heart of hearts, knowing that folks, there's that those numbers can't be hit, but it'll look really good to blah blah blah. If we do that, it does help. I think we're still early on, and we can't we can't say this with total fact, flag in the ground type, yes, this is the way to do things, but we are taking a very realistic approach to our budgeting, and that has we just went through a pitch cycle. Some folks have absolutely looked at it and gone, okay, this is this makes sense, while others have looked at it and gone couldn't you you're oh god, what was the one, it's just we're not pushing ourselves hard enough. We're not.
Yeah, we've certainly had people who I think are used to seeing budgets which are built around the entire team suffering, and that's not how we want to do things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the final thing: do you have to have crunch to make a good quality experience? No. That's not true. No. Your optional question, Nick. Which let's make this show go a little bit longer. So what is your stance on a high-level YouTuber? What is your stance on a high-level YouTuber's current argument that there is too much trash on video game storefronts? In your opinion, what causes this? Is it, quote, the lazy devs, bad management, lack of motivation, lack of storefront curation, or do gamers just need to settle down? Sorry, I'm long-winded. Keep up the good content. Nick J.
I think... Go on, you go first, because I know we differ on this one, right?
Yeah, so I, that one, there's no, it's not, these things are never black and white. I say this a lot, so many of these issues are issues of percentages. It is a bunch of different little things that, they take up various percentages, but it is not one issue that causes it. It is multiple issues. So is argument that there's too much trash on I believe in curation. I do. I believe that it would be a better scenario if there is curation. That's my sort of thing. I get concerned from a consumer perspective if a consumer sees or player, however we want to say, because someone who's actually paying for content, if they are having a difficult time finding quality content because there's too much out there, that is a problem. But Alexander, the cream always rises to the top. No, sorry, I strongly disagree with that premise. I believe that of the cream, a percentage of the cream rises to the top, whereas there's much more cream to have there. This is getting really weird now, but that it may not have be the first time out of the gate that that quality developer could make something good. It usually takes 2 to 3, 4 cycles before they do that. And if they can't even make a living while trash is, oh, it's a joke, it's funny, haha, like I can put this out there and it'll get attention. And then by giving this trash attention, it distracts from quality that's out there. I think that's a problem for the ecosystem. And from an ecosystem perspective, I think curation and making sure that the ecosystem is in balance is incredibly important.
So my view, I do think curation is important. I think having people who are pointing the way to things is crucial and will be a big part of it. I think it can be integrated though. I think you can have open places, open stores where curation is present. I think of I don't know how it is in the US, but the iTunes store in the UK has some stuff there that's kind of open. I mean, iTunes isn't super open, but is relatively. But then you also have these kind of curated sections with recommendations, and I don't just mean in terms of like algorithmic recommendations. I mean literally like curated section. Movies for the summer, I think just popped up on there, that kind of thing. So I think you can do that. I also think that in a way it's a problem that's inevitable and has been around for longer than I think people give it credit. There will be bad video games. We can't fix that. And the reason for bad video games is that lots of people make video games. It's the same with movies, TV. The easier it becomes to produce something, the more people come through the door. That means that you'll get worse games or lots more worse games. It also means you'll get really some fantastic, fresh new games from people who wouldn't have been able to find a voice otherwise. And to me, that's the win that makes all this worthwhile is that we do find the awesome, super talented, cool new person who can't get through the door on the old system. As someone who struggled to get my first game on Steam, I like that wouldn't be so much of a struggle now. But it would also have been harder for my game to be seen now. So I don't think it's an easy problem to solve. I think everyone's trying to though, The other interesting aspect of this in terms of indies discussing it and debating it is always someone's a loser in the scenario. If you over curate, you're gonna lose a lot of those cool new young talents. If you under curate, the old guard will find it harder to sell their new stuff that's very good. It's always plus and minuses for everyone, and I think we need to always be very honest about that visibility is a finite resource, and how we deploy that and how we share that among people is a big, challenging economic question.
If you have a burning question about games, game development, or just about the complexities of the universe, you can send those questions to us via contact@bithelgames.com. Hopefully it's working now. Contact@bithelgames.com, through the YouTube comments of this show, or on Twitter by pinging @MikeBithell or @Slawinski. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bithell Games Podcast. We can always use your support, so please provide reviews and 5 stars on iTunes, likes and subscribes on YouTube, and positive reinforcement on whatever other platforms you're hearing this show on whenever possible. This podcast was produced very much so this week again by Jonathan Downen. We'll be back next week. I'm Alexander Slawinski. Thanks again, and get in the last word.
Mike, resident.
So in conclusion, I would just like to reiterate, I guess for the third time now, companies are people, and they should be taken care of.
Companies are people. Oh my goodness me. I accidentally let an American into my company. What am I doing?
Corporate personhood is a thing. And they should be responsible, just like normal people are. Just people don't do that. No, hold on. Let me redo all of this.
Companies are people. Off.
Companies are people.
Off.
All right, Jonathan, we're going to try this one last time.
Yeah.
38 and 50.
Best outtakes of the podcast yet, this. It's great.